Today I'm going to tell you a story. And the story is about a giant. People have been telling stories since before they even wrote stuff down, right? Did you ever, they tell stories for fun and for entertainment. And they tell stories sometimes to explain things like landforms. Have you heard of Paul Bunyan?
Yes.
Yeah. Paul Bunyan was this really big giant, and he was in the United States. And they say, he dug Lake Michigan so that his ox could drink water, like a little dish. And that's how they explain the landform of Lake Michigan. But that's not the story I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you a story from Ireland. And in Ireland, they tell stories about giants too, and they explain their landforms from the stories of their giants. This giant's name was Finn McCool, and he was the biggest giant in Ireland. And he lived at the top of Knockmany Hill. It's the highest hill in Ireland. When he was a young giant, he was super, super strong, but not too smart. And he went and talked to the fairies, because you know Ireland, leprechauns, fairies. He went and talked to the fairies in Ireland, and they told him that if he ate the salmon of knowledge, he would be a smart giant. So he went fishing, and he caught this big red salmon. They're really pretty red. He caught the salmon, and he was going to get the fish hook out of its mouth, and he is a really super nice guy. Super nice giant, not smart, but nice. And he was getting the hook out. He was thinking, I cannot kill this fish and cook this fish and eat it just so I could be smart. That would be mean. So he's getting the hook out of his mouth, and he pokes his finger, and he sticks it in his mouth. Now, what happens when you poke your finger with a fish hook?
You start bleeding.
You start bleeding. So he got some blood in his mouth from his finger, and they say he got some blood in his mouth from the fish, because you know the fish's mouth was bleeding when he unhooked it too. Remember that. And the fish, he said to the fish, I can't eat you. And he was going to toss the fish back into the water, and the fish said, you're still going to get the knowledge that you wanted. So he threw the fish back. Went home to live on Knockmany Hill. He married a girl named Una, a giant girl named Una. She was a friend of the fairies too, and that's an important part of the story as well. So one day, Finn and a bunch of other giants were on the coast of Ireland building a causeway, and a causeway is a land bridge. And the causeway was going to go from Ireland to Scotland. And they were taking these really big stones, and they were putting them in the water, one right next to the other, one right next to the other, to make this causeway across to Scotland. Well, they got the causeway most of the way built, and Finn was out there putting the next stone in. And there was this giant standing in Scotland. And he said, hey! And Finn said, hey. Do you know who Finn McCool is? And Finn said, yeah, I know who Finn McCool is. Why? And the giant on the other side, his name was Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn said, I am Cuchulainn, and I am the biggest, baddest giant in Scotland. And I need to beat up Finn McCool so that I can be the biggest, baddest giant in the world. Well, Finn McCool looked at him and got scared. And he said, yeah, but Finn's not here today. I'll tell him you called. And Cuchulainn said, you tell him, because I'm going to get him. So Cuchulainn went away, and Finn McCool went home to his wife. He went up on Knockmany Hill, and in the afternoon, he came home from work. He was supposed to be building the causeway, and she said, Babe, why are you home so early? He said, I just wanted to see your beautiful face. And she said, yeah, no. Tell me why you're here. And he said, well, there's this giant that wants to beat me up, and I'm really afraid. And she said, okay, I got this. And she went and she talked to the fairies. And then she came back, and she had 9 colored threads. And she braided them, 3 threads into the first braid, and she put it around her right arm. And then 3 threads into the second braid, and she put it around her heart. And then the last 3 threads into the third braid, and she put it around her ankle. And then she went to the neighbor's house, and she borrowed iron skillets. An iron skillet is a frying pan. She went and she borrowed all these skillets, and she baked a whole bunch of bread with iron skillets tucked into it, baked right into the bread. And then she got some buckets of milk, and she made a whole bunch of cheeses, round cheese, out of the milk. And then she got some stones from outside. And she told her husband to get in the baby cradle and pretend he was the baby. She said, I got this. And he was really, really nervous, so he sucked his thumb. Remember the fish hook? He sucked his thumb. Okay, pretty soon you could hear this bam, 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 and the whole earth shook. It was Cullin. And he knocked on the door, and Una opened the door, and she said, hello. She said, where's Finn McCool? And Finn McCool's wife, Una, said, he's not home right now. Would you like to come in and wait? And he said, sure. He said, I'm the biggest, baddest giant in the world, and I'm going to beat up Finn McCool. And she said, my husband's a big broth of a man. He's a pretty big guy. You might not be able to beat him up. You should be afraid. He said, I'm not afraid. And he was sitting there and saying, and then the wind started to blow up on the Knockmany Hill. And she said, you know, when Finn's home and the wind blows in the window like that, he just turns the house. He just picks it up and turns it so the wind doesn't blow in the window. Could you just step outside and turn the house for me, please? Okay. He had this gold finger, and he went outside, and he pulled his finger 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Okay. He pulled his, and he picked up the house. He turned it just a little bit, and he came back in. She said, thanks. And then she said, well, you know, we were waiting. How about we have dinner? And he said, sure. And so she made him like 30 cabbages and 2 sides of beef, and he ate it all. And he was still hungry. She said, how about some bread? She said, here, have some bread. And he took the bread and he bit it and he broke off 3 teeth. Remember the bread?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He said, oh my gosh, I just lost 3 teeth. What is in that bread? And she said, well, it's just Finn's bread. It's the bread he eats every day. In fact, it's the same bread that the baby eats. And so she gave the baby, Finn, some of the bread with no skillets in it, and the baby gobbled it right out. And he said, well, if your kid can eat the bread, I can eat the bread. And he ate another loaf and broke off 3 more teeth. He said, lady, what else does your husband do? She said, well, you know, for fun, he likes to crush stones. He said, I can crush stones. And he pulled his finger 3 times. He picked up one of the stones and he squeezed and he squeezed. He turned blue. He squeezed so hard, and the stone didn't even crack. And then baby Finn, he picked up a cheese, squashed it flat. About that time, Cullin was terrified. He was actually afraid maybe he could get beat up by Finn McCool, right? He said, can I check that baby's teeth and see what kind of teeth he has? She said, sure, check it out. He's just like his daddy. Well, he stuck that gold finger in the baby's mouth. And Finn McCool, the dad, spit it off. Well, they say that the giant's strength was in his gold finger. Well, as soon as Finn McCool bit off Cullin's finger, he was as weak as a kitten. Finn McCool got up and beat him up. And Cullin ran down the hill, and then he ran across Ireland, and then he ran across the causeway, and while he was running across the causeway, he ripped up some of the stones so that nobody could ever cross between Ireland and Scotland again. And that is the story of Finn McCool and the giant of Knockmany Hill.